Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the support tier list for patch 13.3. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out a ton on the channel. Might do a patch overview tomorrow. I am going to look at some of the changes on the patch today, but I know most people that watch the channel are probably most interested in the support tier list and what do I think about these support changes. So, I went ahead and decided to go ahead and put that one out there first. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So there are quite a few things that might be a little different from last time in the tier 2. The tier 1's probably similar, but there's some different reasons. And I will say that let me first of all go ahead and presentation mode. There we go. Might make it a little, I don't think it makes that much of a difference, but I'm not a believer in these ADC, like double ADC bottom. I know we're seeing that like in LCS. I don't know about other like regions, but most of them do not have a great win rate at all, and they have very low presence in pro, and in solo queue their win rates are horrible. So I know it's fun to theorize, about Varus support or Misfortune or like Caitlyn support. Caitlyn support actually does have a decent win rate in pro, but it's a very, very small sample size of just 17 games versus something like Nami has 350 games played so far in the season. So the only one that's an exception to that is Ashe. Ashe does seem to be pretty for real. Her win rate in solo queue is not that great. We'll talk about that in a second, but in pro, Ashe is for real. But I think a lot of people have been trying to figure out what's the next Ashe, when Ashe gets banned as far as like ADC supports go. And the answer is there's really not one most of the time outside of, again, maybe Caitlyn by specific teams in specific situations. But the win rate in solo queue, again, is absolutely abysmal, right? Like, Caitlyn support is like less than a 40% win rate in Platinum and lower, right? Or actually, I guess this is Platinum Plus. Jin supports like 43, Misfortune supports 43. So I always try to keep it real with you guys. I try to be honest. What do I think is actually going to help you win games? What is strong? So some of these, weird picks are like interesting to discuss, but they don't really have a lot of substance to them. Again, the one that at least is picked a lot is Ashe. Right, now she's only got a 50% win rate. So we'll talk about Ashe in a little bit, but she's the only one that I would consider probably playing in solo queue, especially if you don't have a duo. The main reason I think that you're seeing some people try out that double ADC bottom, and it's strange that Sona hasn't really come in because she's like the, champion that was designed to be an ADC bottom for like these double push lanes. I think there's a couple reasons for that. Why you're seeing some people try it in pro. They have a very specific strategy where they want to siege and have hard domination bottom and then be able to either dive the enemy bot lane or focus all of their attention in the top lane. So they have a very specific strategy for it where they want to hard dominate early. Sorry, I'm not sure what's with the camera, but whatever. Hopefully it'll figure it out in a second as far as like losing the focus. So that's number one. And then number two, they really highly value getting Umbral Glaive just for the extra vision control in pro. And Umbral Glaive is a very good item, but a lot of these ADC supports bottom just like fall off a cliff outside of the lane. They don't do a ton of damage. Most of them don't have a lot of CC outside of Ashe with the arrow. I guess you have like Varus with his ult. They do a little bit. But they're also in solo queue where it's not as organized. You're trying to rotate around the map. They're just sitting ducks for getting picked off and ganked in rivers and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just not a real big believer in them. Sorry if you guys are. But okay, let's just really quickly just look at some of the specific support changes they made. And it hasn't been shaking out quite like I thought it would, unfortunately. I thought that maybe we'd see like more AP supports or like AP builds on some of these engaged supports, but that just hasn't really been the case. So like Alistar was one that I thought might actually be quite strong on this patch. We've seen him like way back in Season 1, Season 2. There were like solo lane Alistar like carries, I guess, and a lot of it had to do with AP Alistar and his ratios. His ratios were very high back in the day. Now they're about back to where they were, but of course the meta has changed over the last 10 years, and it's not as OP as it once used to be. But being able to pretty much point click, if you know how to do this properly, and just get a full trade on them with the WQ, it's really hard to trade back. And I mean, even just like maxing headbutt and being able to go up and just headbutt somebody, it's really hard for them to trade back because you're pushing them so far away a lot of the time, especially against shorter range champions. So I don't know. It's interesting changes. Those are some big like buffs to these ratios, and I thought maybe we'd see like Hourglass or something, Alistar. I mean, that is a little weird because you have your ult, but that would just give you another like way to just go all out and engage, and the extra armor gives you some tankiness and AP. But with them making Hourglass 3,000 gold, you haven't seen it as much on supports these days. They did give it more stats kind of to make up for that, but as a support, you don't really want that. You'd rather just have cheaper items most of the time. So, hasn't worked out, but if you want to experiment, let me know kind of what you think about it. Man, this just looks horrible. I don't know what's up with this camera, but I've already gone 6 minutes in, so I'm not going to do any more. Maybe if I, like, sit up really close, is it going to find me in focus? Okay. Maybe it found me. Maybe I just have to get up really close to help it recognize me there. Yeah, it hasn't really panned out, but that's something to think about, if you want to try some kind of AP build, maybe at least Spell Thieves and go for some trades early. It's interesting. But yeah, it looks like it's not that big of a deal, and he's still kind of in the dumpster. I mean, it's not like that bad, but he's like 48%. So Alistar has not mattered. Braum, I don't think has mattered that much. If you have a lot of auto-attacking champions on your team, like maybe a Kindred jungler, Master Yi, that type of stuff, like maybe Braum's a little bit better. At higher levels, or no, you can get extra stuns at slightly lower levels. Winter's Bite. Now, I mean, that does matter. You can get more of those off in lane, and that is what you max first. So early game, you can trade a little bit more. I mean, Braum's cool. I just feel like it's really hard to engage with him, and his peel is just not as valuable in a meta where fights are going to last a long time, and there's a lot of melees that just ignore your shield, basically. So he's okay. I mean, these bonus resistances are pretty dang good, too. I mean, that's like almost double. So, I mean, maybe it'd be too strong, but I think they really should just like make his engage better, like lower the cooldown on it by 20 seconds or something, or like increase the animation speed or the CC duration. If he hits somebody, they're actually CC'd for like 1.5 seconds or something. Nautilus. Now, Nautilus was already like pretty good in pro. He was getting played some. This mana cost reduction is a very big deal on the W. Especially when you're trying to clear wards, you can use that W as an auto attack reset. But when it costs 80 mana, it's at a very high cost. So you'd occasionally have a ward, your sweeper would time out before you could get the third hit because you didn't want to pay the 80 mana. Or if you paid the 80 mana, you'd be in trouble. And the shield strength going up a little bit is okay. So these are like fine. But this one's kind of a big deal. I mean, 20 extra damage if you max your E. And it has a much better AP ratio on it of 0.5. Like the Q already has like a 0.9 or something, a 0.8 or a 0.9, and then the ult has at least a 1.0, maybe higher. So he has good AP ratios, and Hourglass would be really, really good if you can figure out how to get that on him, because he is squishy when he goes in. Like this shield is still on the weak side compared to things like Leona, Alistar, those other champions. So Hourglass, I think, would be a tremendous buy. I wish they'd make Hourglass like a mythic or something, or just like make it a 2,500 gold item again, but maybe that's too strong. But if you do take Glacial Augment, which is pretty common on him, if you go Glacial and then you get the free stopwatch that lowers the cost by 250, I believe still. So that would be 2750 if you want to go hourglass. So we'll see. I don't know if there's any other AP things. I mean, you could do like Frost Queen or like the Crown that reduces damage when you go in. If they don't have a lot of poke, maybe that's an interesting option. You could try Shirelia's. You don't really need it because you're trying to land a hook or you just press your R, so you don't really need the move speed. But people are playing him a lot more on this patch. We'll talk about him more in a second. But those are pretty good buffs. The physical damage on the E is up a lot, but usually you're using this to run away, so like it does help with your all-ins, but Pike's still going to be pretty snowbally. These Rakan changes are pretty good. They're not insane. His win rate is up. It'd be the first person we'll talk about. But we've got this mana cost reduction is pretty big, so you can throw more quills early, and then you get 1 second on the cooldown. And the heal is also up, so you're rewarded if you hit it. Now, the AP ratio is about the same. That's a big increase on that heal over time, but that's not dependent on how many points you put into the queue. But we might see the return of, like, 3Q Rakan in lane. Go, like, 3 Qs, then max W. Your shield is going to be a lot weaker. Your base shield on your E and the cooldown is going to be a lot longer, so I would say you're probably going to be worse in mid-game team fights when you're around, you know, levels 9, 10, and 11, you're really going to feel it. But this would give you a much more aggressive laning option, especially in some of these tougher poke lanes, which historically have been a problem for Rakan. So this might fix some of his major issues. Sorry, I don't know why the hell I thought I silenced that. And then Thresh is still probably going to be in the gutter. They gave him like some better AP ratio. So again, you could try something like an Hourglass or a Crown Thresh if you want to. But otherwise, I don't think that's going to matter too much. And the tenacity changes make CC champions a little bit better. Okay, let's get into the tier list itself. So I do think that Rakan, as I mentioned before, is still going to be my top pick, as always. Am I biased? Yes. But, I mean, it's legit. I don't know if I've ever seen him with a 53% win rate before. Maybe, like, way, way back, like, close to his release. But that is really, really high win rate for what I consider to be the second most difficult support to play. Now, yes, he's not as hard as, like, Azir, Yasuo, or something like that, but he's hard to play compared to a lot of supports. Just because you have so many options and how you can sequence what he's doing, and you can be punished pretty hard if you sequence that poorly. Like, a lot of Rakan's play, the enemy can interact with it, and it really sucks if they do, right? So a lot of times you'll find yourself in this kind of cat and mouse where you're thinking, should I go in with my W, or do I have to wait on their disruption first, right? Because you can be knocked out of your W by a million different things if you get displaced, stunned, CC'd, whatever. It doesn't work. A lot of people can dash out of it because it's really telegraphed. So if they have Gale Force, or they just naturally have some kind of blink or even flash or whatever, they can get out of it. So you have to calculate that, and you have to understand what do you need to be watching out for in terms of their interaction. You have to decide, are you going to use your flash to open, like go in with your R and then flash to make sure you get the charm first and then W? Do you go for the full CC duration on the R and then try to W, and maybe they have a 1/10 of a second to flash to get out of it? Or do you just overlap it, lose some of your CC? You can decide if you want to E in first, like R, and then E in first and then go for the W. Do you have time for that? Should you even go in at all? Right, because if you go in to try to save an ally with your E and then you get hit by CC or by their area of effect stuff, you might die. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. He's very squishy, and if you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're going to die. So he's hard to play, in other words. And for a 53% win rate, that means that there's a lot of like noob Rakans that are still winning a lot of games, even if they're not playing him fully optimally. So I think that's a strong endorsement that he's very strong right now. And if you look at this win rate too, or like this play rate, especially in Diamond, he's gone from 5 up to like 8%. So it's a pretty big old jump. So I'm not sure about the build. I'm almost positive you want to go Spell Thieves now because you can get more value out of that with your Qs. He still has a really good AP ratios on a lot of his abilities too. I don't know if I have him. Yeah, we've got him pulled up here, but like his passive's almost a 1.0 AP ratio. So it's like every piece of AP is effectively in an all-in situation going to be extra health, one extra HP. The Q with these buffs, like it's not insane, but it does go up by 45 per point, so that's pretty good. Get 3 points in that, it'll be tapping them for 160. But then it also heals you for even more. So like at level 5, it's an 80 heal now for both you and your ally. That's a lot. That's like way more than a Sona W at those levels. Now you do have to hit it though, right? Sona's automatic. And then like they did nerf the baseline damage on this by 20, but it still has a 0.8, which is pretty high. And then your shield, remember you get 2 of these. That's a 1.4 ratio. So he has really good AP ratios. It's just like, is it good enough to warrant getting AP items? Because again, you're squishy and you need to, you know, not die. So typically, you know, the most common item on him is still going to be Shirelia's. It fits really well with his kit because he really enjoys the movement speed personally to get in and engage. But a big problem with Rakan too is sometimes you're so fast with your R and you have so much mobility with your W that it can be hard for your team to follow up if they're, you know, on the slow side. So popping that Shirelia's as you go in ensures that your team's going to be able to get there in time to follow up because you don't have a long duration CC chain most of the time, right? Like the most you're going to get is R, flash, and then that'll give you like 1.5 seconds, and your W is going to give you another half a second. So it's not like Leona or Nautilus where you can lock them up for like 4 seconds. It's usually pretty quick. So you need your team to be able to follow up. It does have the AP component to it. It does have some health. So overall, it's a good item. It doesn't have resistances on it though, armor or magic resist. So that is going to make you a little bit more vulnerable if you get CC'd. So it's a good option, especially if your team is ahead and you're just trying to run them down, or if you're going to be roaming a lot. It's good. But if they have a lot of CC and you're behind and you might get, you know, blown up by their Zed or something, then having some more resistances could be good. Now, Radiant Virtue is an item that presumably got nerfed on this patch, but the win rate is still really high on Rakan, so I'm going to have to rethink that. I was thinking about abandoning Radiant because I thought it'd be too bad, too expensive at 3,200, but it looks like that's not the case. You do still get 15% of your own max health whenever you pop this, and it has a bunch of HP on it itself, so effectively, you know, if you have 2,000 health after you get this item, then it's going to be giving you 700 health whenever you go in for a fight. That's a lot of HP, and you have armor and magic resist, and it's going to be healing you for 12% of your max health and all of your allies around you. And that includes your new max health number, right? So that's going to be healing everybody for somewhere in the neighborhood of 300. So effectively, over the course of a fight, this item is going to give you personally something in the neighborhood of like 1,000 health, because of the boost, and then because of the healing on top of it, and excuse me, and it heals your allies for more than Redemption does most of the time, right? So it's basically like a really good tank version of Redemption that can't miss and has a way broader range. So did they take the ability haste off of it? Yes. Is it less healing overall if someone is at extremely low health? Yes, because they got rid of that scaling, which was kind of weird to begin with. So it is nerfed from where it was, but it was so good to begin with that I think it's probably still worth getting anyways. Especially if you want to protect a Mage Eyes, which is the build I've been running quite a lot lately with some mixed results, but I would say mostly positive. It's good. Locket is okay. It's basically like a cheaper version of Radiant is how I think of it. It's 2,500. It does give you like a really nice shield, but it only lasts for 2.5 seconds, has a shorter range, and the 2 armor and magic resist is kind of underwhelming compared to the 100 health you can get here. I know it affects everybody a little bit. So, and just the stats overall obviously are a little bit lower. It's got 20 less health on it, or 200 less health on it, which is worth about like 500 gold. So it's like you're paying 200 more gold effectively for Radiant Virtue, which is going to give you just a lot more like guaranteed value, I think. So, and that reflects, right? Like this has like a 4% higher win rate. Now, this is the one that I was thinking could be interesting. Everfrost on Rakan. It's close to 100% efficient. You get 10 extra AP for each one of these. But it does give you that extra piece of CC that Rakan really is missing that we talked about before. So doing your combo and then being able to CC him for that extra 1 second is pretty nice. You are going to be a lot more vulnerable with this. You're not going to have the armor or the magic resist. It is 2,800 gold, so it is expensive. And you really don't need the mana. Like, mana's nice, but you really don't need it. Now, Proto Belt is another one that is an interesting choice. It's also 3,200, so it's expensive. You get 90 ability power, which is very high. You get the extra supersonic, which gives you damage, and it gives you movement speed when you're running towards somebody. And you get the spell pen. So if you're really trying to blow people up, if you go like with Proto Belt, and then you get Sork Boots, and then you complete your ward item or whatever, that's going to give you 15 off of Sork, and then you get 11 off of those items. So you're going to have 26 pen. So you're really going to be hitting pretty hard for a support with those items. So that's a really high win rate. Low sample size, so we'll have to check that out. Even Shroud is another sort of cheap Radiant-ish option, but instead of healing people or healing you, you deal extra damage, 10% extra damage. So that is pretty nice in a lot of situations. Rod is something that, again, you don't really need the mana. It doesn't have ability haste on it, but it does give a lot of health over time. That extra level is pretty nice. And, of course, it gives you a lot of extra ability power, too. Now, one other thing they don't mention or talk about too much on here is Crown. Now, this again is 2,800. It's got the mana and all that, which is sort of whatever. But this does protect you as well. 75% against all ends is very nice. So if the enemy doesn't have a lot of poke, it's good. And you get the extra 1% movement speed and 8 ability power. And you get the 10 to 40 ability power. So usually probably about like 25 in a lot of situations, which is 95 ability power for 2,800. So that's more than Proto Belt. You just don't get the movement speed forward, but you get the protection instead. So I don't know. Those would be like the two I'd think about probably, are like Crown and Proto Belt as far as like AP items go. If you want to try that out, Night Harvester is okay, but it's been nerfed so much. It's basically the same damage as Proto Belt, same cost as Proto Belt. But with Proto Belt, you get the spell pen. So it's like, you probably want to just go for Proto. One thing also is you do get this alternator, which I think is, no, maybe it hasn't been nerfed, but that can surprise people. That does a lot of damage early on, especially if you get like, you start off with Spell Thieves and you get alternator, or even if you do like the ring that turns into Mage Eyes and then you get alternator on top of that. Like, that's a lot of AP that can catch people off guard early on. So Rakan's pretty good. You can still build him traditional, just straight up, you know, Shirelias into Chemtech or Knight's Vow or something like that. But you can also do an AP option if you want. Hourglass, also really, really good on Rakan. I don't know about going for the Glacial build. I think Guardian is still better. They're pretty close. If you do want to go for a an Hourglass somewhere in there, then I would say probably go for Glacial so that you can get that discount, the 250 discount. It is really, really good on Rakan, like especially for dives, because getting that extra 2.5 seconds might get your W or your E off cooldown so that you have a little bit more time to move and reposition. So it can be really handy. And if you get rooted, something like a Morgana bind, for example, then you can Hourglass while you're binded. I'm like 99% sure you can. You just can't move, but you can still use abilities. Or Lux Bind. So there are some very specific situations where Hourglass, obviously against things like Zed, um, it can definitely shine. So Rakan, as usual, ton of options. Mostly got buffs on this patch, with the exception of the W, which is like later in the game, maybe a nerf if you don't build AP. But I think it's good, and even if you don't get multiple points in Q, still having that extra 10 heal every time you hit a Q, and having the lower cooldown and the lower mana cost on it is going to help you a lot through some of these poke lanes. Okay. Sona, not a lot has changed there. I still have her tier 2, even though her win rate's not as high as a couple of the other champs. There aren't that many runaway champions that are just like out of control win rate wise. Sorry, let me just respond to this just real quickly. Okay. Sorry, that's my aunt, my grandma's birthday. We're doing her birthday party this weekend, and my aunt goes to bed really early, so she might go to bed within 30 minutes before I finish this video. And I needed to confirm we were going over there for lunch. So, anyways, tomorrow. But yeah, so win rate not that high, but I still think she has a lot of potential. She's still pretty good with this new build, right? Where you go like Rod of the Ages and the Seraphs. It's just like a super scaling, good poke lane. If you don't want to, buy into the if you don't want to buy into the like double AD bottom, then she's a really good poke option to put with a Caitlyn or a Jen or whatever. Sorry, I'm kind of battling this cold. But she's still pretty good. So nothing new there. Just good poke, good scaling. You got to be careful for flanks. You got to be careful against all-in champs. She's going to have a hard time against like a Blitzcrank, Nautilus, Leona, those types of champs potentially. So risky. But in solo queue, especially at Platinum lower, it's really on them to close out the game before your items come online, because if you just have 5v5 team fights just front to back, everybody's A-ramming, she's going to be, one of the best at 25 plus minutes. So great early, great later. You just got to be careful how you're kind of maneuvering her. Okay, and the Nautilus, a lot of people might have him up at tier 1 on however they do the tier list, S+, whatever. And he is good. He did get a lot better on this patch. We talked about why mostly. And he's, I think, a lot more versatile in his potential builds than people make him out to be. Because I do think the AP could be good on him. Now, he could also be too squishy. But I think you should go back to the E max. People moved over to the Q because I don't remember. I think they nerfed the E, or they like buffed the damage on the Q, or I don't remember what they did. But if you look at like the E, this is what old school, like, season 6, 7, and 8 people would max E. And I was always a big advocate for the E max because it's just so much more damage. So you're way more relevant in these kind of longer extended team fights, and it gives you wave clear, right? So yes, you personally should not be taking on a CS as support, but sometimes you got to cover a lane, and a lot of times you can just help prep the wave for your ADC. Just throw a maxed out E on the wave, and then Caitlyn Qs it, and boom, it's done, right? So having that wave clear is really nice, and it does have scaling on the slow as well. And remember that you can hit people multiple times with these waves. So you can do up to double the damage. So it says like almost 200 there, but you can really get up to about 400 damage, I believe. It might only be 50% more. Its waves deal 50% beyond the first, but there's 3 waves. Boom, boom, boom. So it's a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage potentially. I don't think this number... No, they did bring it up to 50% because it was 30%, I think. So that's a really big AP ratio. So yeah, I think the Emax, it is outperforming, although it's a lower sample size. A lot of people just don't even read these patch notes and things, though. They just kind of do whatever their Professor app or whatever tells them to take. But you can do the Aftershock variant, or you can do the Glacial Augment if you want to go for Hourglass, which I think could be a really strong second item. Then again, getting perfect timing is going to be a pretty good choice. And it looks like Radiant is still the way to go on him if you want to do that. Or Even Shroud. Now, I wouldn't try too many goofy AP items on him. I mean, yeah, I just wouldn't do it. Like, you could try something like Everfrost. Now, Shirelia's, again, is okay, but you don't need that movement speed because you've got good range on your hook. Your R has pretty good engage range. So I would pick a more traditional tank item. Lock It is a trap. As you can see, it's way, way lower contribution than Even Shroud or Radiant. So if you can get away with Radiant, that's probably where I would go. And then second, again, you have all these tank options. Low sample size on the Hourglass, but again, I think especially with those ratios, if you need a little bit more damage, could be decent. Now, the new one here, and I might make this the picture of the video. I probably will, because this is like the new hotness. And I really haven't seen a lot of people talking about this. I haven't watched a lot of other content creators, to be honest, as far as sort of support content creators. But this just popped up on my radar, is the Annie support. Just when I just clicked on it here, like, what are win rates on champions? What's the highest PBI right now? And she actually popped up. Now, it's still a fairly low play rate, but, I mean, 3.5 is a legitimate sample size, right? Like, it's not under 2%. I think under 2% is really, like, you know, grain of salt type of stuff. But 3.5 is pretty legit. And it's almost got a 55.5, almost a 56% win rate. And Annie did get several buffs on this patch. It wasn't classified as support buffs, technically, but the buffs were for things for support Annie. So they really buffed this shield on her. So I forgot they even changed this back in the day, but you can actually put this shield on somebody else. So it's, you know, can be like a Janna shield type of thing. And whenever you shield somebody else with this, then it also shields Tibbers. So Tibbers also gets the shield. So they increased the strength on this at early levels in particular to 60, which is pretty good. And I've got her pulled up here so we can see the actual numbers on this. So it's only 40 mana at all ranks for this. It's 800 range, so that's really good. Janna's shield, by comparison at max rank, is like 100 mana. So it's far cheaper on the mana. Low cooldown, 12 seconds. Again, that's low, right? That's like, I think Lulu's is 10. Maybe. Karma's is something like 10. Janna's is like 18 or something. But really low base cooldown. Lasts for 3 seconds. Non-decaying. Does not decay. And you get bonus movement speed on the person. So around like level 6, it's 30% bonus movement speed for 1.5 seconds. So it's kind of like a like Nami's passive, sort of, like, or like a Karma shield, pretty much. Like, you put it on them, they get a little bit of extra movement speed, which is cool. Now, whenever anybody hits the target, then they get damage reflected back to them. Now, this can only happen once, which is what they changed on this patch. So, you know, at max level, it's 90 damage reflected. That's once per target, though. So if you throw this on a tank that's engaging, it's going to give them movement speed, a shield. Now, it says while it's active. I don't know if, like, if the enemy breaks the shield, then this doesn't apply anymore. I'm not sure about that. But it's dealing at least 90, and if a tank goes in with a lot of resistances, it's probably going to hit at least 2 or 3 people, right, whenever they hit the tank. So you're looking at something that's reflecting 180 or 200 damage, and it's a 0.4 each. So if it hits 3 people, that's a 1.2 ratio with 270. And if you're putting this on Tibbers as well, right, then all of a sudden that's like a 2.4 ratio with a 540 damage contribution to a team fight. And it's an 8-second cooldown that you can keep throwing up. So, in other words, it's a really, really good shield. A very deceptively good shield. And even early on, is her auto attack range still like 625 or something dumb? Yeah. So they just for some reason never got rid of this from like season 1. So she has a 625 auto attack ratio. So basically you can run in and keep auto attacking, and then if they want to try to trade with you, just pop this shield on yourself. They're not going to hurt you. Probably like they're not going to break through that shield with one auto attack, and it's going to reflect an additional 30 damage. So you can just keep auto attacking a lot of ADCs outside of like Caitlyn, maybe Ashe, like these shorter range ADCs. You can just keep autoing them. You do have to watch out for the minions coming back at you, but again, you can shield yourself and it'll block damage from the minions too. So that's going to help her trading a lot in the early game, and you can just sit on this stun too while you're auto attacking and like shielding yourself. And then if they want to come at you, then you just hit them with this, and you're going to be able to get your stun up, which is 1.2 early, but then at level 6 it's 1.5. And then, of course, once you get to 6, like Tibbers, a lot of damage coming up, has that sort of burn. Now you can shield Tibbers to help protect him longer. And I think that he got extra health too, right? Scaling. Okay. So before he had no scaling. I mean, that's not like an insane amount, especially as a support. You might have 150 AP or something like that. But he'll get him like 100 health or something. And then he gets like a little bit of extra armor and MR, and then the movement speed is a little bit faster. But I think the shield being bigger early on and getting a bigger AP ratio and the damage reflection being way more with a better AP ratio and being on a much, much lower cooldown, 2 seconds, like that's huge. So that's what a lot of people are doing with Annie right now, is they're actually maxing shield and then points in Q, and it looks like you just keep auto attacking. They try to trade with you, just throw up a shield. It looks like they take Glacial because you do have that on-demand stun with your ultimate, and then also your Q whenever you want. So that's handy. You get the free boots, which allows you to, get your other stuff faster. Biscuits is kind of whatever. So yeah, I mean, she's got a pretty good old build. Maybe we'll try it out. I mean, she's still going to be vulnerable, right? If you get caught out in the wild, you do have a stun and you can run away with your E. So there is that. People were getting Rylai's on her too, which works really well with Tibbers. I don't know. That's actually the highest win rate rush item is Rylai's. And you see that on a lot of pet champions. Or it's like, it's good with like Dinger, Malzahar, Zyra, stuff like that. It's close. There's a lot of stuff you can get on her. It's pretty good. But yeah, having this on Tibbers, so you get that slow, and then you've got the Glacial for additional slow. I think she looks pretty good. Pretty good. Now, I've not played against her yet. I haven't played much on this patch. But that's definitely someone to keep an eye on. And then we have Blitzcrank, and I know it's taking up a ton of time here, so I'll speed it up a little bit. But Blitz, nothing really new there, I don't think. You just land your hook, you kill something. If you miss, then you're worthless for 20 seconds. It's the same story. It's always been with Blitz since Season 1. There are a lot of squishy champions that are vulnerable to getting hooked. I would say especially like Sona, Annie, if you can get her. I mean, even Nautilus, if you land a hook on Nautilus, he's probably dead, right? Because he's not that tanky, and his main form of tankiness is a shield, which you can break with your ultimate. So, pretty good into a lot of matchups. Good against Ashe. But yeah, not a lot of new technology there. Ashe is, like I said, very popular. I know that Dynasty is a big fan of Ashe. Longtime friend of the channel. And he's been sort of repping the Ashe for quite a while, the Ashe support. And I've tried it. I don't know. Maybe I can try it again. But, my problem is you're so vulnerable. As Ashe, like, you do have your slow with your W. You do have your arrow, which can help. You do have your hawk shot, which is very good for scouting. She's really solid with poke early, and she's one of the few of these kind of ADC, type of champions that actually has a reasonable build outside of just Umbral. So being able to take Mandate because you're constantly applying slows is going to keep this up almost all the time, right? It's 6-second cooldown per champion, but it's just going to be up a lot, and it's giving your team a lot of extra movement speed, a lot of extra damage. It's a cheap item, 2,500 gold that you can get early. You do actually have an AP ratio, I think a 1.0 on your arrow, so the AP is not like completely wasted. So it's a little bit of like a weird item, you know, seemingly for her, but actually fits really well with her kit. And then you have Umbral. I mean, this is the only reason, not the only, but one of the major reasons why people are sort of playing these strange 80 bottoms is because you basically get an extra sweeper. Like almost 2 extra sweepers. They have nerfed the cooldown on this a lot, but it's still far shorter than most sweepers. And you kill wards faster. So that's a big deal. So it did get nerfed on this patch. It's not quite as good as it was, but it's still pretty good. This is pretty curious that Hail of Blades is better than Comet. I mean, I guess later on in the game, but you're not doing a lot of damage with your autos later. It looks like everybody's taking Hail. I would think that like Comet, just for the poke, would be more relevant early, but maybe Hail just gives you something you can do later. But yeah, I mean, the name of the game here is pretty much spam W in the laning phase, get poke, and then just throw arrows, and it's just exploiting the super low cooldown on this. You get so much CDR with Ionian Boots, plus this, you know, gives you 40 something. I think you usually take like ulti Hunter 2. So yeah, you get the arrow down to like a 30-second cooldown or something, and then you just keep throwing arrows over and over again. And if you land the arrow, then somebody's gonna die. It does pretty good damage by itself, but obviously the big ticket is the 3.5-second stun potentially. So that's pretty much it. If you're good at hitting the arrows, she can be a really good support. You just got to be careful not to get engaged on her or caught out later on in the game. But overall, definitely worthy of a top spot. Again, I could see people maybe making the case for her being S tier, but I think that would be based on like pro play, because in solo queue, again, she's very popular, but she's only got a 50% win rate. And in pro, where it's a lot more organized, you can do more stuff with that hawkshot information. You know, being able to push and get priority in your lane, you can leverage that a lot better to take dragons, to roam, to tower dive, and do all these things. So I just think the super heavy pressure, like really vulnerable lanes, you know, like the Ashe, Caitlyn, and stuff like that, it can work out, but you can also get really blasted if you get camped by the enemy jungler. If you're not getting a lot of help from your jungle, and especially if the enemy team has, you know, some kind of CC, a Nautilus, a Blitz, or something like that, it could be a problem. Okay, Maokai, pretty much the same thing. He's been nerfed a few times, primarily for the jungle. I don't think it's affected his support like power that much, but as usual, there are 2 different versions of Maokai you can play. You know, the more fun version, the AP version, did get nerfed with Demonic, but the tank version is still quite good, and I think that's what a lot of people are going with these days. Actually, a lot of people are still trying to make the AP version work, and it still has a high win rate. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. The AP is the more unique version because you get really, really good vision control with these seeds. I climbed a lot with Maokai, and I was talking about this year and a half ago. I didn't invent it, but I was definitely playing it when it wasn't as popular. But it is really nice. Like, those seeds are insane. Like, they last for so long, and they give you tons of vision. They do a lot of damage. You have a lot of CC with your R that's very difficult to avoid. You know, the enemy usually has to be very organized and have one person sort of tank all of the roots, or tank the, you know, they have to stack up to avoid the entire team getting CC'd for 3 seconds. Then you have a point-click CC with your W. You flash W when the jungler's coming for a gank. It's almost always a guaranteed kill. Your Q Does pretty good, respectable damage, and it's a displacement to stop different kinds of movement if you play it correctly. So he's got a lot of things in his kit. He has sustain. He's reasonable against poke with his auto attacks. So he does have a lot going for him. Now, again, you can go with this AP build or Righteous, or not Righteous, Radiant. Still has the highest win rate. People like Deadman's on him. I'm not entirely sold on this. Like, I know you want it for the movement speed so you can get closer with your W and then you can roam around. Like, I get it, but it doesn't have ability haste on it. It's not a mythic. The components are okay, I guess. It's kind of expensive for what it is. I don't know. It's low sample size, but I've never been super impressed with that. Even Shroud is quite good because you have a ton of CC, so you can keep this up almost always in fights, and it's a lot cheaper at 2,500 gold. And getting a mythic fairly early as support is kind of a big deal too, because your ward item turns into a legendary item, so you get that first mythic bonus like pretty quickly compared to other champions that skip mythics in other roles. So yeah, you can go kind of the mandate demonic build, or you can go for something like the Even Shroud and then whatever Thornmail type of build. So anyways, got a lot of different options. You can try to be tanky, you can try to go for the AP build. Brings a lot of unique utility with his vision control. Still a great champion. Also a flex pick, right? So when you pick Maokai, they don't know, is that going support or jungle? Could be played top, not played top as often these days, but I think it's still more popular in the jungle. So if you're an early pick, it definitely can confuse the enemy a little bit. Not that most people are picking to counter pick anyways in Platinum minus, especially like to counter pick a jungler, but it's just one extra little cherry on top. You've got Leona. She actually conspicuously didn't get any buffs on this patch, I don't believe. She was like one of the only like main tanks that didn't. I was kind of surprised they gave Nautilus very specific buffs, but not Leona, when Nautilus is the one who's been getting like some pro play with decent results. Like nobody's playing Leona. So that's a little weird. Her win rate is not phenomenal right now. It's like 50%. She's tankier than Nautilus, and you can all in and kill people easier because you can go through the wave earlier. So if you have a Draven or a Jhin or Samira or just something else that can really get some kills and snowball hard early, then I could see playing the Leona. She does have very low cooldowns. So that is good. Her E engage range is a lot shorter than Nautilus's. It's a more slender hitbox, and it's easier to outplay her R. It is on a much lower cooldown, but champions with things like Gale Force or just anyone with a blink can potentially get out of it. Versus Nautilus is you're not getting away from that missile unless you have like Hourglass or some very special like immunity interaction like Tristana's jump or something. So it's a lot harder to outplay Nautilus, especially in team fights. Right, because when that missile's going through and you're able to click their ADC, their backline, when it goes through, it can hit everyone else in the way and knock them all up too. So, especially with these AP changes, I think Nautilus has the potential for more damage, more CC, more reliable CC, but the trade-off is he's squishier, he can't go over walls, he does have better wave clear if you max E, which again seems silly on support, at first, or it might, but it's actually pretty important if you can get it. So we'll see. You can play her though. I mean, maybe I could see an argument where you put her down in tier 3, but I just think that engage in general can be quite strong, especially against like Sona, Annie, Ashe, a lot of these champions. And the fact that Leona can pressure, like I said, from an early level and engage anywhere. They can't hide behind minions. Can exert a tremendous amount of pressure, especially if the enemy doesn't come down and gank you. You can really take over a lane pretty fast with Leona if you get ahead. And then Nami is one of the last ones that I'll mention here. The Nami-Lucian interaction did get nerfed, but She's still pretty good. Again, I wouldn't argue too much if someone wanted to put her down in tier 3. I don't think she's tier 1. I mean, maybe you could put her there. She's a good bully early on. You do have just press W and trade with people, which is nice, but her mana costs are somewhat high early, so you will run out of mana doing that. She does not have a lot of great escapes. She does have like pretty good peel. Yeah, she's got like a 50% win rate. So she's got like okay peel, obviously, with her wave. If you need a knock up for like a Yasuo or something, you've got wave and bubble, which are pretty good. Bubble is kind of a mixed bag. Like, you can throw it over minions, but you have to land it right on them. So, you know, they can dodge it a bit easier. They have more directions they can dodge than a line skill shot. One of those, like, I don't know what you'd call it, like a spot skill shot. Because they can walk in front and dodge it too, where obviously they can't do that on a line skill shot. They can walk forward or backward a lot easier. They don't have to just go side to side like they would with a blitz hook or something. So she's alright, and the scaling is not nearly as good later on as something like Sona or something like Soraka. Lulu. A lot of these enchanters are just going to outscale late game. So she's okay. Early game bully, obviously great with Lucian. Okay with other champions. I think good enough to keep her, you know, in tier 2. But again, I wouldn't argue if people wanted to put her lower. And then that's pretty much it for the newer stuff. I feel like I might be forgetting 1 or 2 supports. I kind of did this sort of quickly because I do want to get it out before the stream. But I think I hit most of the important ones here. So again, I do not buy into these ADC things. They don't have a great win rate. I know people like to make all caps videos about them and stuff like that. If you do want to, you know, try one of these out, Varus might be the best one. He did pretty good damage. At least he has CC with his R. He does have healing reduction with his E. So, I mean, obviously Ashe is the best one if you want to try it. But if you want to try, like, just something super weird that's like one of these, like, probably the Varus. I did hear Sneaky and Medio saying that Callista, like, if you use her R properly, basically like an old Tom Kench, or almost like a Tom Kench chomp, being able to use that R to pull somebody in and get them away from stuff can be good, but I just think it's too gimmicky. I mean, I guess I'll put Zillion up here. Zillion's probably not, like, that bad. You can play him and win with him. Yeah, I don't think there's that much technology. Like, Amumu's been nerfed a lot, and I wasn't really a huge fan of Amumu to begin with. He doesn't have a lot of pro presence, which obviously doesn't matter too much for solo queue. But he was just kind of everybody's darling for... I know he's been nerfed a few times, but I just never really, like, got it. Like, early game, like, his bandages do a lot of damage, which is cool. Obviously, his ult is good if you hit a bunch of people with it, but, like, his other 2 abilities are just such trash. There's such a slender hitbox on the bandage. His ult has a really long cooldown, and I just feel like his damage outside of lane is just really, really lacking. And he's super squishy compared to a lot of other engaged champs. So, you know, you could still run him. You could make him work, especially if your team has like 3 AP or something. You got an AP, you know, mid laner, AP top laner, something like that. The fact that he increases magic damage whenever he hits people with his auto attacks or his ult is very nice. So there's that. Then you've got Dinger, who's still like an okay poke champion. If the enemy has a lot of melee, his turret can be super strong. One annoying thing is that the junglers can smite the turret, so if they have a smite available, that takes away a lot of your power if you want to do that. He hasn't been played as much in Pro, I don't think. He did get some nerfs, but I didn't think they were that big of a deal, but maybe they were. Even when people were playing him all like last patch or something, he still had below a 50% win rate. So I think he was just a little overhyped. Everyone I think has gone over to Ashe just because her engage is a little bit better. Like Dinger can do an upgraded grenade and throw it, but it's a much longer cooldown than an Ashe arrow. Rel does have a really high win rate, so I could see somebody wanting to put Rel in tier 2. Um, she's very good against Rakan, which is obnoxious, but she didn't get any direct buffs, and I feel like her damage is still like pretty low compared to some of these other champs. So I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating her. Maybe she can be stronger. I just have not seen a lot of her. Renata, her kit seems good. She got nerfed somehow. I'm not 100% sure like why she completely fell off the face of the earth. But she's just not being played as much. And again, Senna's kind of a mystery to me too, because it feels like Senna should be good. I don't know how like Navori works with her, because she gets like some crit, right, based off of her like how many souls. Isn't it something like every 25 souls she gets like 10 crit? Or something like that. I don't know if we can see her passive here. 20 stacks, she gains 20 range. Okay. So 20 souls, she gets 10% crit. So if she gets to 60 souls and then has Navori Quick Blades, that should do it, right? So you just need 40% crit in order to activate the Quick Blades. So it seems like that should be a thing. I mean, I guess she wants Umbral too. Yeah, the Quick Blades build actually has almost a 55% win rate. So maybe, I mean, it's a low sample size. Maybe people are just doing it wrong. Your abilities deal 20% increased damage based on... I didn't realize it had that either. I thought it was just you got cooldown lowered from Transcendence. I didn't know it had that second passive. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like it should be good. Like, she's got good poke, like pretty good scaling for a support with the souls. Like some engage with the W. That's a 2-second root. I mean, that's not an Ashe arrow, but it's a normal ability that's pretty dang good. You've got this E, which is nice for different situations. R is like a semi-global, really long cooldown, but I don't know, man. I mean, maybe her numbers are just too bad. But if you wanted to play a poke champ, it feels like, you know, Senna might be pretty decent for that. So, anyways, that's it. I gotta get out of here. I don't want this video to go much longer than an hour, but I think there are a lot of different supports that can be good right now. There aren't that many that are super oppressive, like pick ban, you must play this champion, right? Obviously, Rakan's very good, but somewhat situational in the sense of, like, you need to be able to have experience on him to get the most out of him. Sona's probably the only one but her win rate's not even that high. But yeah, there's nothing else that's really just like, man, you really gotta, like, ban this support, right? I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's in like that, you know, 49 to 52 range that's all like pretty viable, pretty playable. So try it out. There's some weird stuff out there. See what you think. Come by the stream. Let me know if you've tried Annie support. What's going on there? If you've tried some different builds on champions like Alistar or Maokai or whatever's working for you. And I'll see y'all next time. Have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe.